My guys are setting up gear. We want this to be a practical time for you guys. My name's Jeremy, by the way. I'll introduce the guys when they're ready. We debated different ways to do this. It's a little hard in a group this size to get really practical, but we want this to actually be helpful. We don't want to just lecture at you guys. We want to show you how we do what we do, essentially. And that will mainly be them, because I'm a classic worship leader, which means I'm a guitar hack. I don't actually totally know what I'm doing. It's taken me 20 years to figure out how to keep up. But I don't put together my own pedal board. I have brilliant people like that. They do that for me. So I don't even dress myself, you know? They do that for me too. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. No, I was complimenting you. So a little bit about me. I've been playing guitar since I was 12. And I learned those three famous chords that make the whole worship world go around. G, C, D, baby. Yeah, that's right. I mean, with a capo, you're unstoppable. It's basically still. I don't think I've grown a whole lot since I was 12. I did learn in E minor, and that just took it to the next level. And anyway. No, I have grown. Not a ton, because I haven't really had to. I don't know. I think when it came to music theory, I've been a part of bands, like since I was 16, I think I started my first band. And every band that I was in, all my guys were super into music theory. They were super into the science, the math of music. I never liked the math of music. It was a big turnoff to me. But I've learned at Bethel Church. Bethel Church is where we're from. It's a church in Redding, California. And all these guys are a part of that church. And so they don't just play with me. They play with Brian and Jen Johnson. They play with William Matthews. They play with a lot of different leaders. And I want them to share their wisdom in terms of what they've learned in terms of how to follow a leader. Because worship is different. And especially worship at our church is very different. Worship goes for an hour to an hour or more, generally speaking. It's gotten a little shorter. It's now probably more like 45 minutes. But, and we don't have a whole ton of time to rehearse. And a huge part of our church is just allowing space. We do work on arrangements for songs and that kind of a thing, but sometimes if we really feel God moving in a certain section of a song, we'll just camp there. When I feel the weight of God on a moment, I've just learned that I don't want to go anywhere until I feel that moment lift. And that requires a pretty skilled band to be able to follow and create, know just how much to create, knowing if I even want them to create a sound, or if I just want them to stay down, or if I'm looking for, okay, I need you to build. There's something building, and they have to be super sensitive. They have to be in tune, not only with what I'm doing, but with what the Spirit is kind of doing through the music. Because sometimes it's more about what's happening musically than it is about, what I'm doing. So they're not just trained in one sense. I've played, to be perfectly honest, I played with some of the most amazing musicians in the world. And it used to be this kind of formula. Whenever we would do a live recording, this record label I was with, they would hire the best musicians in the world. And it was always the worst time of worship, like almost always, because there was no flow, there was no history, and these guys had never really done worship, so they had no idea what to do with moments, So I'm stoked with these guys because they not only are very skilled musicians, but they're sensitive to moments. They know how to flow in the Spirit, or sometimes I'm not a huge fan of our charismatic phrases that we can use sometimes that are very confusing. but there is something about being sensitive to what God is doing and playing accordingly. And these guys travel with me because I trust them to do that, and they've proven themselves to do that very, very well. So I'm going to turn it over to, this is Daniel McKenzie. Say hi to Dan. And I'm going to talk about you first. Just give me a second. I'm going to introduce you, officially. All right. Dan is kind of a music virtuoso. He plays just about everything, and plays it at another level. He's where Dan's headed. Probably he will make some of the best records of our day. I have just a sense about him. How many guys know the Loft Sessions? It's a project that Bethel put out. A huge reason why that sounds the way it sounds is because of Dan. He was one of the producers, probably one of the main producers for that. So a lot of the musicality, the musicianship, the sounds, the creativity, that's this guy. And we're just really proud of him. And he plays bass for me and keys, and he runs some of the click and the loops and different things. And I'm going to let him talk. And there you go.
That was very kind, Jeremy. Jeremy! I'm all warm now in this cold room. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming out. It's so cool that you guys are here with us and that we're here with you. It's really such an honor to be here. And I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I'd love to know what your questions are, but obviously we'll have a forum for that in a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing we get to do day in, day out, and it's really truly an honor to do it. For me, I was doing music before I came to Bethel. I'm actually a Canadian. I don't know, any of you know where Canada is? It's a small little place. It's America's hat, as they call it. But I was doing music there full-time before I moved to California, and it's kind of a change of pace to do solely worship stuff for, as a job, but also to be able to come home on the weekends and serve at Bethel and be involved in what's happening there. And I think I was talking with a couple guys at lunch, my man right here, about kind of my philosophy on approach to doing music in church and being able to facilitate worship for such a really delicate thing, as we all, I'm sure most of you are involved, that's why you're here, but it really is quite a delicate thing to be able to bring what you kind of carry as a musician and as an artist. For many of you, I'm sure you would classify yourselves as that, but to a corporate worship setting and being able to navigate how to bring honor and respect to what the Lord's doing in a room, but also not losing what you kind of call your own as the art goes. And so I'll just talk about that for a second. For a long time, my entire philosophy on it was I want to make sure that I show up completely prepared to do and be able to execute whatever on my instrument, like whatever I feel the Holy Spirit impressing on my heart, and I don't want any of my lack of skill to get in the way. Does that make sense? So growing up, that meant practicing 6 to 8 hours a day on whatever instrument that may have been. For many years, it was guitar, and unfortunately, I passed that torch on to Michael. He does a great job.
Oh, thanks.
Doesn't he do a great job? Isn't his tone just phenomenal?
Thanks, pal.
Isn't his hair wonderful?
Okay, too much.
All right. All right. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me to where I am now, that I feel like I'm able to finally focus on what the more important things are, which is really focusing on what the Holy Spirit's doing in a room and what I'm able to bring to a leader as kind of a support system, which is pretty much the only reason I'm able to kind of do the keys and bass thing, which is actually really fun. I think I get a little too bored with one instrument. Yeah.
I've actually been telling people that all week.
That you're bored?
Why is he on two? He's so good. He just gets bored with one and starts goofing off.
I'm just bored.
Yeah.
I'm also on Facebook half the time on my life.
Skyping your girlfriend.
That's actually not true, but I will tell a quick story.
He's not joking.
I will tell a quick story, and if any of you were here last night, I freaked out for about a chorus and a verse of a song because I realized that my Wi-Fi was on, and my Skype was on, and my volume was on coming through the PA. So I was praying Michaela wouldn't call me during the set.
That's his girlfriend.
It was scary. Anyway, so that's kind of like the broader concepts of what I like to bring to the table. Super privileged to travel with Jeremy. He's an incredible worship leader. There's hardly anyone like him in the entire world. And beyond vocal range and sheer good looks, he's somebody that really has a passion and like a life goal to be able to hear what the Lord is doing and be able to bring honor and praise to him. So it's pretty much the most incredible thing that I've done with my life yet, is being able to do life with him. And come on, bro, he says. Come on, bro. I can speak from kind of what we do at Bethel. There's so much spontaneity that happens, and some of the stuff that you would assume isn't spontaneous is pretty much 100% spontaneous. So anytime we get on stage, half the time we have no idea what the set list is, or what key we're playing in, or what instrument we're going to end up being on. It's really scary sometimes, and it's probably the thing that brings the most strength to us, because we're able to make sure we're really quick on our feet. It's pretty scary. But it's good. It's really good. It's terrifying. John Paul actually had the opportunity to start playing drums at Bethel, and was terrified for about 3 years. Little joke in there for you. Go practical. How many like gear? You got about 6 people who like gear. What does everybody else do? Sing. Djembe. Djembe. Okay, well, I could talk about gear all day, but I feel like that's going to be useless to the 90 people who didn't put up their hands. So, oh, you want to hear? Now you're speaking to my heart. All right. Well, I'm playing bass at the moment, pretty much all the time with everybody. So, something that I'll talk about really quickly is bass pedals. Any bass players? Bass players, show hands. Bass player, what's up? She's a girl, if we didn't catch that. She's a rock star. There, her friend's chiming in. This is good. Bass pedals. It's awesome. I would recommend getting some pedals to shape the tone of your bass. It's actually interesting what it does to the vibe in a room. If your bass tone's able to cut through a mix, but also support the rest of what the band's doing, it's pretty incredible what can happen. So I have 2 or 3 pedals that I'll bring on the road with me. One's a Sans amp. I could get into specifics, but if you want to chat about it, we can talk later. Little Sans amp DI. It's really cool because it takes like a lot of the crappy bandwidth off the bass and it really makes it a focused sound in the mix. And then I have another pedal called the Aguilar Tone Hammer, which hammers the tone with mids. It's a wonderful thing. And then that's kind of the way that works. I play with a pick 95% of the time, which if you asked me 3 years ago, I would have made fun of myself for. Yeah, it's really interesting. I find playing with a pick brings another dynamic completely to what I'm able to do. And I'll actually use this little finger here to roll off the tone knob for quieter moments, because Jeremy used to get on me for assaulting his ears and also the entire audience with the aggressive tone that would come out in down moments. Yeah, it was abrasive. Sorry about that, by the way. But yeah, so actually, if any of you bass players haven't tried playing with a pick, I would really encourage even just trying it out and seeing what it's like. These are awesome. This is probably 50% of the stuff I do in the studio is still with my fingers, but it's very interesting what you can do, especially in supporting a moment in a worship set. Sometimes there's just only a certain amount you can go before your fingers don't give you what you want, if that makes sense. And then I can talk about the keys stuff for a moment as well. This is just kind of the most random little M audio controller that does nothing except send, signals, on and off signals to my computer, which is the controller for everything else. So, anybody heard of Ableton Live? Yeah? All right. These guys are awesome. So, anybody heard of Reason? Reason. This is incredible. At Bethel, there's like 10 people who have heard of about that kind of stuff. So it's amazing. And then anybody heard of Native Instruments? Yeah, some native stuff. All these things are basically synth programs and then like hosts. So Ableton's like a big localized host that pulls everything else in and like patches it through digitally. It's essentially what you would. Does anybody remember the 80s? It's good. You know, like the analog synths, the big synths that they would, the hair metal rock and great stuff, and it's all of that put into like digital packages so that we can travel and do stuff really efficiently without spending, you know, $100,000 and flying gear everywhere we go. So you can get some really amazing synth sounds with this stuff, and Ableton is like the perfect host for it. And it's cool because you can actually sync everything with, you know, drummers, BPMs, or you can actually run click from this for metronome for everybody's in-ears. If you're running in-ears.
Which, by the way, if you're curious, we use click for everything. And I think for people, they think that the click wars against spontaneity, and it doesn't. We do have to be careful, like how we navigate it. Every person's a little different. But we find even when it just steps into a creative moment, like we keep that click on. It keeps the whole band locked in, and it gets really, really messy when we don't have the click on. But it'd be kind of nice. We'll let JP talk about how he runs click. That's just something I don't want to forget.
It's hugely important. But as far as a keys player goes, if I was triggering loops or any kind of rhythmic keys stuff, obviously it's kind of imperative that you're synced with the click or with whatever tempo your drummer's playing to. Get a little squirrely otherwise. So yeah, obviously beyond pads and synths, it can do like, you know, pianos and Rhodes and whatever bells you want and stuff like that. That's kind of boring. It's kind of boring. Any other thoughts? Anybody have any quick questions? Any like broad, send me in a certain direction questions? Hit me. Latching pads. Latching pads. Okay, I'll talk about that really quick. So basically the only way I can survive playing two instruments is being able to put a chord down with like a synth patch that has a lot of movement within itself. Like it'll modulate and it'll kind of switch between waveforms, and you know, verbs and delays will make things happen and stuff like that. So you can actually latch in Ableton where you can basically freeze a chord to do whatever it does within itself, and then using filters, you can make it interesting and being able to still cause it to be more dynamic and more interesting during the song. Does that make sense? So in any pad scenario, my default is to just do a 5-1-3 of a chord, you know. Kind of, you can mostly get away with that as long as the chords aren't going too crazy and changing too much. But
why don't you talk about what you just said in terms of the 5-1-3?
5-1-3. Anybody heard of the Nashville number system? Or have classical training or whatever, classical students, cool. When you think of a key, you think of the tonic as the 1, you know what I mean? So you think you're in the key of D, D is a 1 chord. What's the 2 going to be in your musical alphabet? After D is E. So basically, all the way through the scale, you can assign numbers to any given note in the key, and just so it's a very easy way to communicate. So at Bethel, we've kind of instituted, or mandated is more of a better way to put it, that everybody is able to communicate with the Nashville number system, because it gets us around spontaneous moments and any spontaneity that happens very efficiently with, you know, minor hiccups if people are forgetting.
So we're not shouting out G minor 7th to D to, you know, whatever it is. You know, we don't shout out those kinds of chords. If anything, I'll say 4-1-5. And they'll just lock into that. Or if I have time, this is always disastrous, but I'll kind of flash whatever number. I'm like, the 1, land on the 1. Like if we're going to an ending for a song that we haven't rehearsed, I'll look back and I'll try and say, hey, I want to end big, and I want to end big on the 4, or I want to end big on the 1. You know, it's just and it's honestly, that's where I've been challenged, because I'm not, I didn't learn the number system until I came to Bethel. But I've realized, okay, that's a really important thing for me as a worship leader to know. And in terms of rehearsal time, it's probably cut down on so much time, having all of our people. So I don't have to transpose for people at all. Like if I'm writing out a chord sheet, I'm like, here's the progression. The bridge, you know, and you just lay out the number system. and it's kind of brilliant. So that's a big part of what we do, and there's a reason why we mandate it. It's kind of a survival tool at this point.
It totally is. We don't have practices at Bethel, which is another scary thing. You guys have worship practices during the week? Some of you know. Most of you know. Oh, I can't tell. It's too bright. Hands, yes. That's amazing. That's so cool. Honestly, the only reason we don't is because either half of them are gone on the road, or there's so much happening at Bethel that we can't even get a moment into to practice in the sanctuary or anything else. So it's definitely been an incredible tool to be able to keep things together and cut down. Or I guess because of not being able to practice, that's how we can survive. So yeah, so that kind of makes sense about the pads, latching and that sort of thing. Yeah, we can do more question and answer after, but I think Mike's gonna do a little background of what he does and what he brings to the
80s
table.
guitar shred.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Everybody say
Sweet.
hello to Michael Pope.
Hi, guys. Awesome. Where are my guitar players at? Show of hands. Right on. And out of everybody who just raised your hands, how many of you guys are lead guitar players? Like you into electrics, all that good stuff. Sweet, sweet. So I'm going to touch on tone a little bit, but before I do, and this is something that actually applies to more than just guitar players, but I want to talk quickly and shortly about the playing side of it, because that's a huge part of worship music, especially for me. So for me, there's really three types of playing that you're going to be doing. The first is practice, which is at home, and I can't really stress how important that is. That's something that, I've been convicted of lately, playing so much at church and traveling with all of our different artists and stuff. It's something that I've kind of let slip, and my playing on stage has actually suffered because of it. So definitely practice at home. That's playing with a metronome or click, brushing up on your theory, learning new songs, new genres of music, all that kind of stuff, super important. And on stage, you're going to have two types of playing, and the first part is parts. I love to play parts for several reasons. One is parts just work. The reason the guitar player is doing something on a recording is because, hey, this works. We know this is going to be successful.
That's good.
So,
can you say what you mean? What are parts?
So a part is when you listen to a song, you notice, okay, the guitar player is doing this in the verse. He's doing it in the first verse, second verse. That's the verse part. Same thing with the chorus. He's doing the same thing in the chorus, maybe the same thing in the bridge. It's those things that are just repetitive in the playing. And
For those of you who still aren't tracking, for like the song "You Are Good," one of the parts is the intro, and it goes. That's
way
a part.
too much with that one, man.
Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
Cool. So it's those things that, like, you hear those and you recognize what song it is, and that's one reason why I like to play them live. So many songs are based around the guitar these days that when people hear that guitar line, they instantly connect with the song because they've listened to it at home. They recognize it, and instant engagement. So parts are great, and I would encourage you guys when you're at home and when you're on stage, play parts when you can. When you're in the arranged part of the song, stick to those parts. And it's not that you can't go outside the box, but it's that generally in those parts, staying inside the box is a really good idea. And it's a great starting point. The other kind of playing is spontaneous playing, and that's another side that in worship music is really, really important because it brings something really fresh and really new to the playing. A lot of times at Bethel, we'll get through the arranged part of the songs, and I'm done playing my parts, and this is where the practice at home comes in handy because all of a sudden we reach this moment and you're like, okay, what's the Lord doing? And it's up to me to play something that fits and something that the Lord is moving on. So definitely practice and work on your spontaneous playing. So jumping from that and into tone, there's three things that you really need for great guitar tone. And the first one is a tube amp. There's two kind of amps. There's amps that we call solid state, and those have computer chips and resistors and all a bunch of nerdy things inside of them. basically. Brands like Crate and Line 6, or Line 666, as we like to call it at Bethel. Any amp that doesn't have little glowing light bulb looking things in the back would be a solid state amp.
Quick interjection. Pope is what we call a purist. So if any of you have those amps, don't be offended.
Yeah.
This is his opinion.
It's not that those amps don't work. It's just that tube amps sound better. Anyway, but generally, solid state amps are just trying to mimic what tube amps are doing. So in the long run, you're probably, most definitely, in my opinion, better off with an amp that has tubes. The amp here is a Vox AC15, and it has tubes in it, and it's a wonderful sounding little amp. I don't know what kinds of amps you can get in South Africa, really, because I haven't, been able to go around. But, if you're a guitar player and you're really looking to establish your tone, a tube amp is the best place to start, because you can put an okay guitar through an awesome tube amp, and it's still going to sound great. The amp is what you're miking, like.
Jeremy just said he does it every day.
There.
His guitars aren't awesome. That's what he was saying.
Actually, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think a good amp is kind of the most important part. Next, obviously, having a solid guitar that feels great, that sounds great, and kind of fits the genre of music that you're doing. If you're playing music, you probably don't want some like Jackson or super metal shred guitar. What? Yeah. The tones and the sounds aren't going to match up. So, try and be genre conscious. Worship music has a lot of connection in with rock and even country and blues. So try and get a guitar that. Third is pedals, and that's a really long, complicated world. If there's time later, we can, come find me and you can ask questions about that. But just quickly running through the essentials. In order of importance, I would say the first most important pedal you can have is a drive pedal. And basically what that does is it's a little box that just makes your guitar sound really, really dirty and aggressive, and a lot louder. And having a drive pedal that works with your tube amp and with your guitar is really super important. I've got a tube screamer that I love. Tube screamers are great. There's a ton of different kinds out there, and they fit a lot of different price points. So those are a really good starting point. Next would be a delay pedal. And what that does is it basically repeats what you play, and it makes you sound a lot bigger. I have two different delay pedals. One just kind of fills space. The other one, back to the click, having those repeats timed and perfectly in sync with your drummer and the rest of the band is actually really, really important, because nothing's worse than being in a down moment and playing something and some weird repeats just start happening. Everyone's like, what is going on? I don't know what is happening. And then you just feel embarrassed as a guitar player. So I have a pedal called the Eventide Time Factor. Every day. Oh. Yeah. So I have a pedal called the Eventide, and what I can do is programmable. So I can actually punch in the BPMs that JP has going back with a click. BPMs are beats per minute. So the timing of the song, I can put that in the pedal, and those repeats will come out in time with the click in my ears and with the drummer. So the end result, you guys all hear awesome sounding repeats. Yeah. Another really, really important pedal to have, and a lot of guitar players I found don't really use it, is a compressor. If you're like me, like when you travel and you have a lot of different kind of amps, the main difference in amps is the way they compress, which is kind of the way the notes sing through the amps. If you're a guitar player, you'll understand that. But having a compressor, it basically creates a sonic hug. You've got really loud notes and really quiet notes. And what it does is it squeezes or it compresses those, and it makes everything you play sound a lot more uniform. If you're a guitar player and you've got one, the biggest way you're going to feel it is in your hands. But having a good compressor and knowing how to use it is really, really essential for a lot of things, whether it's a front of house mix or just the way your guitar feels in your hands. Everything after that is really, really what I would consider a toy. Things like reverb pedals, or we have these pedals called pogs, and they create an octave up from whatever we play and an octave below.
Jeremy has a fascination with pogs.
Yeah.
Sometimes he turns it on full
Yes.
and out of place.
My band loves it when I use the Pog pedal. They're just like in love with it. So
That's sarcasm.
yeah.